I don't think there's a major military option that Israel will retain right now, but there are other tools at the disposal of President Trump and his team. For example, making sure that Hamas does not have access to the humanitarian aid that will flow into Gaza, because in the past, Hamas would steal 60% of that aid and enrich itself.
World leaders, including Donald Trump and Keir Starmer, have signed the Gaza peace plan at a summit in Egypt on a day of momentous events, which the president said would bring a golden age for the Middle East. The last 20 living hostages held by Hamas have been reunited with their families in Israel after 2 years in captivity. The parents of hostage Aylan Moore met him in hospital.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Well, Donald Trump says he's now stopped 8 wars in 8 months, claiming his personality is all about stopping wars. The US president addressed the Israeli Knesset before flying to Egypt for the summit.
I intend to be a partner in this effort in the sense that we're going to help and we're going to do something that became unbelievably popular. Everybody wants to be on it. It's called the Board of Peace, okay? How about that? Is that a beautiful name? Like a board of peace. The only bad thing from my standpoint, every single nation involved has asked me to be the chair, and I'll tell you, I'm very busy. I didn't count on that, but you know what? If we do it, we'll do it right.
Well, Keir Starmer said the United Kingdom is prepared to play a part in monitoring the ceasefire and the decommissioning of Hamas weapons.
It is critical now that all parties follow through on the commitments. Decommissioning of weaponry of Hamas is hugely and critically important for the future peace. We have got experience in this in relation to Northern Ireland and decommissioning of the IRA's weaponry, and that's why I do think, and I have suggested the UK would be well placed to carry out that vital role.
Well, let's speak to Michael Oren, who's a former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Good evening to you, Michael.
Hi, Carol. Good to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you with us. What do you see as the real significance of this day of really momentous events and a huge amount of emotion?
Well, precisely that. Personally, on an emotional level, the return of these hostages. And it's very difficult to explain to non-Israelis what this means and what the whole notion of hostages means. In Jewish culture, it's deeply embedded in our Bible, in the Talmud, that the Jewish people have to do everything possible to redeem hostages. So this was a deep and open separating wound for Israeli society, and now it's been closed. It is yet to be closed, it has to be said, for the roughly 24 families whose the remains of their deceased loved ones have not been returned yet in violation of the ceasefire. So that remains to be seen. But having said that, this is a momentous occasion for Israel, and I think it holds out tremendous promise for Gaza, for our relations with the Palestinians and with the entire Middle East.
And clearly we have seen the extraordinary emotion of families who must have feared they'd never get their loved ones home again. Of course, they will have to go through the process of readjusting after the trauma that they have been through. But the other significance in the broader terms, surely, is that Hamas have now given up what they were using as a bargaining chip in this conflict.
Well, what Hamas hopes to have is to retain its guns in Gaza and relinquish sovereign responsibilities. They want to be like Hezbollah in Lebanon, which before the war was controlling southern Lebanon, but didn't have sovereign responsibilities for Lebanon. And Hezbollah had a shield. It was called UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force. Hamas wants a shield. It wants Palestinian civilians. It wants an international peacekeeping force. And Hamas can use that shield for rebuilding its military capabilities and eventually for relaunching military attacks against Israel. The goal here is to deny Hamas that ability. And I personally believe that countries will not send peacekeeping force or technocrats to Gaza if Hamas has those guns. So the continuation of this process and the 20 points are really contingent on fulfilling the next stage. And once that is fulfilled, all sorts of possibilities will open.
Yeah, and we heard President Trump today saying that negotiations on that next stage, those next stages, have already begun. And what do you think we should expect to see there? Because, I mean, it does require Hamas to disarm, to give up its weapons. I mean, that is a process which in Northern Ireland, closer to us here in London, took several years to achieve. And it is going to be very difficult indeed, isn't it, for Hamas as a force to actually do that?
In all due respect to Britain's accomplishments in Northern Ireland, the IRA didn't have between 20 and 30,000 rockets, didn't have, say, 30,000 terrorists under arms, and didn't have 500 kilometers of tunnels, under Belfast and Derry. So you're absolutely right. It's actually much more difficult. And the IRA wasn't a jihadist organization who believed in martyrdom and believed that retaining those guns was an essential part of their DNA. Hamas without guns is like saying ISIS without guns or Al-Qaeda without guns. It is very, very difficult, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. I don't think there's a major military option that Israel will retain right now, but there are other tools at the disposal of President Trump and his team. For example, making sure that Hamas does not have access to the humanitarian aid that will flow into Gaza, because in the past, Hamas would steal 60% of that aid and enrich itself. There'll be no more arms flowing in from Egypt, no more money coming from Qatar. So Hamas will be cut off and isolated. And there are many thousands of people in Gaza who have deep grudges against Hamas and may be seeking revenge.
But is there a risk that Israel may see that Hamas is not fulfilling its side of the deal or not fulfilling it sufficiently, and will then feel that it does need to send troops back into Gaza or back further into Gaza from the line to which they've withdrawn?
Well, I'm kind of speculating here. I think now that the population of northern Gaza is now streaming back to their homes, I think it'll be very difficult for Israel to renew major military activities. That doesn't mean it can't renew surgical military activities and to ensure that every Hamas gunman who goes out of a tunnel will not be able to go back in that tunnel. And that can be done today. But again, I think the major tools here are not military. I think the major tools are economic and political, and it's further pressure on Hamas's patrons in Qatar and Turkey and other countries to put pressure on them. That has been very, very effective in achieving these 20 points and in securing the release of the hostages.
What about Prime Minister Netanyahu's position? I mean, it's been notable, hasn't it, that for many Israelis, they have been thanking President Trump rather than Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you think that his position is vulnerable now, or will he actually yield political dividends from having overseen the end of the war?
And the answer to that question, surprisingly, Carol, is yes, to both of them. Right now, Netanyahu was riding high. He had the president of the United States praising him to high heaven in front of the Knesset and calling him one of the great war leaders in history. That's a remarkable political boon for him, for Netanyahu. But Israeli politics are a rodeo. And Netanyahu can be up today and be down tomorrow. I remember last summer, after Israel's extraordinary victory over Iran, Netanyahu was maybe contemplating going to early elections. And then all of a sudden, the famine situation started in Gaza just a few weeks later, and he was down in the dumps again. So it's uncertain right now. Right now, the government is supposed to last until next October. That's when elections are occurring. And barring any unforeseen vicissitude, the government will live out its term in office.
Just finally, I mean, President Trump has said he's going to chair this board of peace. He loves that phrase. What role do you see for Tony Blair, who is, after all, quite a controversial figure in the Middle East after the Iraq War?
He's not a controversial figure in Israel. He's beloved in Israel. And I've actually worked with Tony Blair on Gaza issues, and I know he cares deeply about them. And I know there are people who remember the Iraq War and maybe have some type of feelings about Tony Blair. Generally speaking, to the degree that I know our Arab interlocutors, he is held in high regard.
Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the US. It's been great to speak to you tonight. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.